ReviewTyme is the home for all things theme parks. Stay up to date with our videos by subscribing and tapping the bell icon. Epcot's World Showcase is the only place where in a single day you can have a traditional big breakfast in the United Kingdom, enjoy a teppanyaki lunch in Japan, and a traditional pizza in Italy for dinner, whilst washing them down with a Mexican margarita, French champagne, or German beer stein, all without needing to wait in a TSA line. World Showcase was always designed as a permanent international fair, where guests could experience the best food, drink, entertainment and cultures from all around the world, whilst not stepping foot off Disney property. However, World Showcase is also home to the most cancelled projects of any Disney theme park area, and if some of the more interesting ones had come to fruition, you could have added to your dining plans feasting on some bellinis in Russia, sosadi in Africa, or even a lamington in Australia. For ReviewTyme, I'm Luke, and this is a look at some of the cancelled World Showcase countries. Some of the earliest plans for World Showcase called for something much larger than what we ultimately got. One of the first known full models of the park that would ultimately become Epcot Center contained plans for 21 different country pavilions, including a very different looking American adventure, which would have served as the gateway to World Showcase. Some of the more interesting countries proposed in these plans that never saw the light of day again include Saudi Arabia, South Korea, and even an Australia/New Zealand pavilion, which would have featured some restaurants, shops, and even a small-scale replica of the Sydney Opera House jutting out into World Showcase Lagoon. So, we can chalk up another time on this channel where we've talked about a plan between Disney and Australia that sadly never came to be. In the end, 9 countries would open as part of World Showcase on Epcot Center's opening day of October 1st, 1982, with 10 major expansion plots available for future development. The first of which would become home to the Morocco Pavilion in 1984, and the second becoming home to Norway in 1988. Since then, a number of the other 8 expansion plots have also been utilized, though not for brand new countries. The plot between Norway and Mexico is now home to the Royal Summer House Anna and Elsa meet and greet. The plot between Morocco and France is the location of the upcoming Ratatouille attraction, and the plots near the UK are partially taken up by Disney's Skyliner, as well as the Millennium Pavilion, which is a temporary structure, though it does make Disney money as the hireable venue as the world's largest indoor group facility located within a theme park. One of the other plots also contains the African Outpost sponsored by Coca-Cola, which has always been designed as a temporary space filler, though part of that plot seems to be currently being prepared as a construction and staging area for the upcoming Harmonious Nighttime Spectacular. But now let's take a look at some of the projects over the years that very well could have filled some of those expansion plots. The first planned pavilion to open as an expansion to World Showcase was Equatorial Africa. Originally part of the proposed opening day lineup of countries, it would see itself pushed back to a planned opening of 1983, a year after Epcot had opened, and even featured in the opening day Epcot Center TV special. Equatorial Africa would have taken a different approach to other pavilions, being devoted to a number of different countries and locations of East and West Africa along the equator, rather than being devoted to a single country. The large weenie for the project drawing you in across World Showcase Lagoon would have been a large 60-foot tall treehouse, wherein guests could climb atop a wooden observation platform, where Imagineering wizardry would allow you to overlook an African watering hole, where a variety of native animals would come to bathe, drink, and dine. This illusion would have been achieved by a mix of a rear-projected 70mm live-action, perfectly looping film, framed by practical 3-dimensional branches, one of which contained an animatronic lemur. These would have also been combined with wind, water, heat, and smellitzer effects to create a convincing moment, as if you had truly stepped foot onto the savannah. In the center of the pavilion would have been a heritage village, home to a cultural demonstration space that would showcase traditional dancers and other performers, a museum to display African art, as well as the expected food, beverage and merchandise locations for Equatorial Africa. It wouldn't be Epcot without a place to grab a drink. The pavilion would have also been home to 2 major shows, with expansion rooms set aside for a walkthrough 3D audio sound safari. Where utilizing headphones and cleverly placed sensors, you would have had close encounters with African animals through the newly invented Disney 3D audio system, most famously utilized in Sounds Dangerous with Drew Carey at Disney's MGM Studios. The smaller of the 2 major shows would have been Africa Discovered, hosted by famed author Alex Haley. Designed to dispel the myth of Africa being a primitive country filled with wild beasts, this film would have focused on the natural and cultural history of Africa. The big e-ticket show of the pavilion, though, would have been The Heartbeat of Africa, a look at the evolution of music and the African people. The experience would have begun with a pre-show described by Imagineer Ken Anderson as the Tiki Room, with drums. In this pre-show, drums would have magically come alive and played themselves, each beat causing the drum to light up, and with a building beat, the show would crescendo with the room being filled with light, color, and music from traditional African instruments. The drum beats would have continued as guests moved into the auditorium and took their seats for the main show. The Heartbeat of Africa film would have been displayed on a huge 28 by 53 foot screen, and followed the history of Africa told through its cultural music, building to a finale set in a modern, outdoor jazz concert, where the ceiling of the theater would have come alive with an elaborate laser light show. Of course, today, this area of World Showcase is indeed home to an African area. Of sorts. Though sadly, it's not Equatorial Africa, but the African Outpost Marketplace. A quick service food and drink cart along with a few tables, purely designed to fill space and keep people who are told about this upcoming Africa area happy. So, why didn't it happen? Of all of the cancelled World Showcase pavilions, Equatorial Africa was the closest to being made. In fact, all of the pavilion's films had already been shot and paid for, and a model of the project was even shown off on TV. Equatorial Africa was a month off from starting construction when it ultimately got canned for a few reasons, including political unrest in the area and the difficulty of finding corporate sponsors to help build the pavilion. Ultimately, Morocco would be built as an African country in World Showcase, though not quite an Equatorial African country. And a lot of work that went into the Equatorial Africa Pavilion would go on to inspire the African city of Harambe at Disney's Animal Kingdom. And now from one publicly announced yet never built pavilion to another. A Soviet Union expansion for World Showcase was announced by Michael Eisner in January of 1990 as part of the Disney Decade, an aggressive expansion project felt across all branches of the Disney company. Eisner admitted that negotiations had only just begun with sought-after stakeholders, but plans for the area, which would have replaced the African outpost, had already been drawn up and featured fanciful architecture, a family-friendly dark ride, and a spectacular, groundbreaking major attraction. The pavilion itself would have been designed to feature the spectacular onion domes of St. Basil's Cathedral, drawing guests from across the lagoon. The smaller, D-ticket style attraction in the land would have been a dark ride based on the classic Russian folktale of Ivan and the Magic Pike, where guests would have boarded a sleigh-like ride vehicle and journeyed through the world of this Slavic fairy tale, where they would have met Ivan as well as a magical fish as they journeyed through the landscapes of medieval Russia in an elaborate dark ride. In the center of the pavilion would have been a large open square, often filled with traditional Russian dances and entertainment, as well as copies of famous Russian sculptures and statues. Also within the square would have been the entrance to the main attraction of the pavilion, an 800-seat theater which would have housed the show Russia, the bells of change. Within, the theater would have come alive with epic scenes of Russia's history. According to Disney, they were combining forces with Europe's leading theater designers to produce an innovative state-of-the-art theater and show. Guests would have seen the stories of peasants and Tsars, poets and revolutionaries, common men and extraordinary heroes, including scenes such as the Revolution of 1917 and the launch of a Soviet spaceship. The show would have featured a rotating set filled with audio animatronic figures, a sweeping musical score, a film montage and more, all brought together by an actor narrator. The show wanted to show the songs, triumphs and passions of the Russian people. Internal construction schedules would have seen the pavilion break ground in 1997, with its grand opening being in October of 1999. Unfortunately, the Soviet Union itself completely collapsed in 1991, and then the Russian financial crisis hit in 1998, making it impossible for Disney to find corporate sponsors with enough money spare to both construct and operate this expensive planned pavilion. And with many of the internal changes to the country since Vladimir Putin has been president of the Russian Federation, it's looking highly unlikely this pavilion will ever make it off the Imagineering canvas. Of course, we couldn't talk about cancelled and rumoured World Showcase pavilions without talking about the one rumour that never seems to quieten down: Brazil. A lot of the Disney Parks community was sure it was going to be announced as part of the massive overhaul of Epcot, fully detailed at the 2019 D23 Expo. But of course, that never happened. And who knows now how much of the stuff they did announce will happen at all. One thing we do know though is that Brazil as a pavilion has been proposed a number of times, since the earliest plans for Epcot Center. The most recent plans called for the country to be placed between Germany and Italy. Brazil would have been the first country at World Showcase to represent the continent of South America, and would have featured scaled versions of some of Brazil's most famous landmarks, including the Christ the Redeemer statue, the Copacabana sidewalk, as well as some more traditional Brazilian villages. And of course, it wouldn't be Brazil without some entertainment in the style of Carnival and even a soccer pitch. Whilst not a lot is known about the attractions that would have been within the pavilion, rumours suggest that a new Three Caballeros attraction would have been built, freeing up the Mexico Pavilion boat ride for the much talked about Coco re-theme, as well as flying over Brazil, which looked to be a transport ride, taking you above the entire pavilion in cable car style ride vehicles. Sadly, Imagineering couldn't find any external companies to sponsor the pavilion, and whilst it did move on a little further using fully internal funding, that plan was ultimately rejected by Bob Chapek, and the Brazil pavilion quietly saw itself cancelled before it was even announced. Of course, these aren't the only cancelled pavilions ever proposed to be a part of World Showcase, and even upon opening, Epcot was officially advertising Spain, Israel, as well as Equatorial Africa as upcoming countries. Since then, we've also heard rumours and seen concept art for Costa Rica, Switzerland, the United Arab Emirates, and so many more. But those are all stories for another time. From the home of all things theme parks, I'm Luke for ReviewTyme. Thanks for watching, liking, and subscribing.